Look, I need to get this off my chest because what happened 7 months ago still has me fuming. And honestly, the way this all played out is something I never could have imagined. But first, let me paint you a picture of my family, because without that context, none of this makes sense. My brother Wesley is 27 and I'm 26. Growing up, he was always the golden child and I was always the screw-up in my parents' eyes, even though the facts say otherwise. Wesley has been fired from 5 different jobs for stealing, not like taking home office supplies, but actual theft that got him escorted out by security. My parents, Brent and Maxine, always made excuses for him, though. Oh, he was misunderstood. Or his supervisors had it out for him. Or he was going through a rough patch and needed their support. Meanwhile, I've been working since I was 16, put myself through community college, and landed a decent job doing administrative work for a mid-sized company. Nothing glamorous, but I pay my bills and stay out of trouble. But somehow in their minds, Wesley is the one with potential, and I'm the disappointment who never amounts to anything. So when Wesley got fired from job number 5 back in March, my parents didn't just let him move back home. They gave him their master bedroom because he needed space to heal from his trauma. I kid you not, that's what Maxine told me when I called to check in. Wesley needed the bigger room and the attached bathroom so he could have privacy to work on himself. They moved into the smaller guest bedroom so their grown son, who steals from his employers, could have the nicest room in the house. But here's where it gets really good. About 3 weeks after Wesley moved back in, I'm sound asleep on a Thursday night when I hear this massive crash from my bathroom. I live in this older apartment complex and a pipe in the wall behind my toilet just exploded. Water is shooting everywhere, soaking through the drywall, flooding my bathroom and bedroom. It's 2 in the morning and there's literally water pouring through the ceiling into the apartment below mine. I managed to find the shutoff valve, but my place is completely flooded. The carpet is soaked, my mattress is soaked, and water is still dripping from the ceiling. I call my landlord, but it goes straight to voicemail, obviously, so I figure, okay, my parents live 20 minutes away, surely they'll let me crash on their couch for the night while I figure this out. I call Brent first. He answers all groggy, and when I explain what happened, you know what he says? Not our problem. You should have bought better renter's insurance. Don't even think about coming here and waking up Wesley. He needs his rest. I'm standing there in my flooded apartment at 2 a.m., and my father is telling me I can't even sleep on their couch for one night. So I try Maxine thinking maybe she'll have some maternal instinct kick in. Wrong. She actually laughed at me. She said maybe this was exactly what I needed, that I was a 26-year-old mess always looking for handouts and bothering them with my problems. She said Wesley has real struggles and real trauma, unlike me just whining about some water damage. I told her the landlord said his insurance would take weeks to process and I needed somewhere to stay until I could find temporary housing. You want to know what this woman said to me? She said perfect. Maybe being homeless for a while would finally make me less pathetic and teach me some independence. Then Brent gets back on the phone and tells me he'd rather see me sleeping under a bridge than in his house because at least Wesley has potential, and I'm just a waste of space who never learned responsibility. The man literally told his own son he'd prefer him to be homeless rather than inconvenience his precious Wesley for one night. I hung up and just stood there in my destroyed apartment, water still dripping around me. But here's the thing that really got me raging. The next morning, I'm scrolling through social media while sitting in my car trying to figure out my next move, and there's a post from Maxine with a photo of her and Wesley having coffee. The caption, "So blessed our son is home safe with us, where he belongs. Family is everything." I screenshot that post because are you kidding me right now? Their son who steals from every job he gets is safe and blessed, but their other son sleeping in his car because of a burst pipe doesn't even deserve a couch for one night? Later that day, I sent them both a text letting them know I was sleeping in my car and thanks for the family support. Brent actually replied saying good. Maybe mold poisoning from the water damage would give me some perspective on what real problems look like. Maxine chimed in saying Wesley never bothers them with his problems like I do, and maybe I should learn from his example of handling things maturely. I just typed back, "No problem, I'll find somewhere else. Thanks for clarifying where I stand." But guys, I wasn't just angry. I was done. Something clicked in my head that night sitting in my car, and I realized these people had shown me exactly who they were. Wesley was their priority, their precious baby who could do no wrong even when he literally commits crimes. And I was the burden, the problem child, the one who deserved to be homeless rather than inconvenience their golden boy. See, what my parents don't know is that I've been planning for this exact moment for years. Every time they chose Wesley over me, every time they made excuses for his behavior while criticizing mine, every time they treated me like I was worthless, I was taking notes and getting my life in order, specifically so that when they inevitably showed their true colors, I'd be ready. I found an extended stay motel and moved in there while my apartment got fixed. Took about 6 weeks total. During that time, I was working on something my parents had no idea was coming. See, there are some things about their living situation that Wesley definitely doesn't know, and that my parents probably forgot I knew about. Information I've been sitting on for almost 3 years, just waiting for the right moment to use it. They want to treat me like I'm worthless. They want to prioritize a thief over their own son who actually has his act together. They want to post on social media about how blessed they are while their other child sleeps in his car. Game on. Update 1. Holy cow, you guys. The response to my last post was insane. Thank you to everyone who commented, especially the person who said my parents sound like textbook narcissists who picked their golden child and scapegoat early on. Reading that actually helped me realize this pattern has been going on my entire life, not just since Wesley's latest theft spree. But anyway, buckle up because things have gotten so much more interesting since I posted. And shout out to whoever said I sounded like I had a plan brewing. You were absolutely right. I've been working on this for literally 3 years. Ever since the incident that made me realize my parents would always choose Wesley over basic human decency. See, back in 2022, Wesley got fired from his third job for stealing. This was from a retail store where he was taking merchandise and selling it online. When the store pressed charges, guess who paid for his lawyer? Brent and Maxine cleaned out their savings account to keep their precious boy out of jail. But here's the kicker. 2 weeks before that happened, I had asked them for help with a security deposit for a better apartment. They told me I was an adult and needed to handle my own financial responsibilities. So, while Wesley gets a free lawyer for literally committing crimes, I couldn't get help moving into a safer neighborhood. That's when I knew I needed to start preparing for the inevitable moment when they would show me exactly where I stood in their priorities. I just didn't know it would be quite this dramatic. The secret information I mentioned? Well, here's where it gets interesting. Back in 2021, Brent and Maxine were having some financial difficulties. Brent's hours got cut at his job, and they were struggling with their mortgage payments. They came to me, not Wesley, Maine, and asked if I could co-sign on a refinance to help them get a lower rate, since my credit score was better than theirs. Now, normally I would have said no, but Maxine actually cried and told me they might lose the house if they couldn't get their payments down. She said I was the responsible one, the one they could count on, and they really needed their son who had his life together to help them out. So I signed the paperwork and became legally responsible for their mortgage. But here's the beautiful part. Once Wesley moved back in and they gave him the master bedroom, I realized they never actually put my name on the deed. I'm legally obligated for the mortgage payments, but I have no ownership stake in the house. They used my good credit to secure their loan, then immediately went back to treating me like garbage while letting their thief son live rent-free in the nicest room. The week after my apartment flood, while I was staying in that extended stay motel, I started making some phone calls. First, I contacted the mortgage company to understand exactly what my rights and obligations were as a cosigner. Turns out there are some very interesting clauses in the agreement about what happens if the borrowers allow illegal activity on the property, or if there are significant changes to the household that weren't disclosed. Then I did something that's been 3 years in the making. Remember how Wesley has been fired from 5 jobs for theft? Well, I've been keeping detailed records of every single incident. Not for any legal reason, but because I knew someday this information might be useful. Dates, locations, what he stole, how much money was involved, police report numbers when charges were filed, everything. But wait, it gets better. While I was doing my research, I decided to drive by my parents' house one Thursday afternoon. I needed to pick up some mail that was still being delivered there from when I briefly lived with them during college. Wesley's car wasn't in the driveway, but there were 3 other cars I didn't recognize. I knocked on the door and Maxine answered, looking all flustered. She tried to block my view inside, but I could see there were people in the living room with laptops and paperwork spread everywhere. When I asked what was going on, she got all defensive and said it was none of my business. They were just having some friends over. Friends over at 2 p.m. on a Thursday with laptops and what looked like financial documents? I don't think so. But I just smiled and said I needed to get my mail from the kitchen counter. As I walked through the living room, I got a good look at what was on the table. Loan modification paperwork, bankruptcy consultation forms, debt consolidation information. Turns out my parents are in much worse financial shape than they let on when Wesley moved back in. And now they've got their criminal son living in the master bedroom while they're scrambling to avoid losing the house I'm legally responsible for helping them keep. That night, I called Brent directly. I told him I'd seen the paperwork at the house and asked if there was anything I should know about since I'm on the mortgage. He got furious with me for snooping and said their financial situation was none of my concern even though my name is literally on the loan documents. I said, well, actually, it is my concern since if you default, It affects my credit score, and I could be held liable for the payments. He told me to stop being dramatic and that they were handling their business just fine without my input. I asked if Wesley was contributing anything to the household expenses since he's living there rent-free. The silence on that phone call was deafening. Finally, Brent said Wesley was going through a difficult time and didn't need the pressure of paying rent while he was healing from his work trauma. Work trauma. That's what they're calling getting fired for theft now. I said, okay, well, maybe Wesley could contribute by getting another job instead of treating their house like a free hotel while they consult bankruptcy lawyers. Brent completely lost it on me. He started yelling about how I was being selfish and unsupportive, how Wesley needed their love and encouragement right now, not judgment from his jealous brother. Jealous of a 27-year-old man who steals from every job he gets and lives with his parents. Sure, Brent, that's exactly what I'm jealous of. But here's where it gets really interesting. After Brent hung up on me, I decided to take a little drive through their neighborhood. And guess what I saw parked 3 streets over? Wesley's car, sitting outside a house where I could see people through the window playing cards around a kitchen table. Wesley wasn't at home healing from his work trauma. He was out playing poker or whatever, while his parents stressed about losing their house and consulted bankruptcy lawyers to figure out how to keep supporting his lazy lifestyle. I took some photos of his car at that address with timestamps. Because you know what? I'm done being the responsible one who gets treated like trash while Wesley gets everything handed to him. They want to prioritize a thief over their own son who co-signed their mortgage. They want to tell me I should be homeless while their precious golden child plays cards instead of looking for work? I've got news for them. The game they've been playing for the past 3 years is about to change completely. And this time, I'm not the one who's going to end up homeless. Update 2. You guys are not going to believe what happened since my last update. Remember how I said the game was about to change? Well, I wasn't kidding. Things have escalated in ways that even I didn't fully anticipate, and my parents are starting to realize they might have seriously messed with the wrong son. First off, thank you to everyone who pointed out that co-signing without being on the deed was a terrible financial decision. You're absolutely right, but here's the thing. I was 23 when they asked me to do it, and honestly, I thought helping my parents save their house was the right thing to do. I trusted them not to completely screw me over. Huge mistake on my part, but it turns out that mistake is about to become their nightmare. So after I discovered their financial situation was way worse than they let on, I decided it was time to have a real conversation with Wesley. Not my parents, but Wesley himself. Because I realized that in all of this, nobody had actually asked the golden child what his plans were for contributing to the household he was destroying. I drove over to their house on a Saturday afternoon when I knew Brent and Maxine would be out running errands. Wesley's car was in the driveway, and I could hear music playing from the master bedroom when I rang the doorbell. It took him forever to answer, and when he finally did, he looked annoyed that I was there. I told him we needed to talk about the living situation and the financial pressure he was putting on our parents. Wesley immediately got defensive and started going on about how he was going through a difficult time and needed space to figure things out. I said, okay, but what exactly are you doing to figure things out? Are you looking for work? Are you contributing anything to help mom and dad with their expenses? He told me it wasn't my business what he was or wasn't doing, and that our parents were happy to have him home where he belonged. I said, really? Because from what I can see, they're consulting bankruptcy lawyers while you're living rent-free in their master bedroom playing poker 3 nights a week. The look on Wesley's face when I mentioned the poker games was priceless. He had no idea I knew about that. He started stammering about how he was just socializing and trying to maintain his mental health through social connections. Social connections that apparently involve gambling, while our parents stress about losing their house. I asked him point blank, do you know that mom and dad are behind on their mortgage payments? Do you know they've been looking into bankruptcy because they can't afford to keep supporting you while also paying their bills? Do you know that I'm legally responsible for their mortgage because I co-signed their refinance 3 years ago? Wesley had absolutely no clue about any of this. Our parents had been shielding their precious baby from the reality of their financial situation while making me feel guilty for even asking about it. He looked genuinely shocked when I told him about the co-signing situation. Then I dropped the real bomb. I told him that, as a co-signer, I have certain rights regarding the property, especially if the borrowers are engaging in activities that could jeopardize the loan, like allowing someone with multiple theft convictions to live there without disclosure to the mortgage company. Wesley got angry at that point. He started yelling about how his past mistakes didn't define him, and he wasn't doing anything illegal by living with his parents. I said, you're right, but the mortgage company might have some opinions about undisclosed changes to the household composition, especially involving someone with your employment history. The conversation got heated fast. Wesley accused me of being jealous and trying to sabotage his relationship with our parents. I told him I wasn't trying to sabotage anything. I was trying to understand why I was sleeping in my car during a housing emergency while he was living rent-free in the master bedroom and our parents were heading toward bankruptcy. He said that was different, that he had been dealing with trauma from workplace harassment and needed family support. I asked him to explain what workplace harassment he experienced at 5 different jobs that all resulted in him being fired for theft. Funny how he couldn't come up with an answer for that one. But here's where things got really interesting. While we were arguing in the living room, Wesley let slip something that changed everything. He mentioned that he had been planning to move out soon anyway because he had some opportunities coming up that were going to change his financial situation. I asked what opportunities, and he got all evasive. Just said he had some things in the works that were going to pay off big time. When I pressed him for details, he said it wasn't my business, but that he wouldn't need to rely on our parents much longer. After I left that day, I couldn't stop thinking about what Wesley had said. What opportunities could he possibly have? He's been fired from every job he's had for stealing. No legitimate employer is going to hire him at this point. So what exactly did he think was going to change his financial situation? That's when I decided to do some more investigation. Remember those poker games I'd been tracking? I started paying closer attention to the timing and frequency. Wesley was leaving the house 3 nights a week, always around the same time, always going to the same neighborhood. Last Tuesday night, I followed him. I know that sounds intense, but I needed to understand what my brother was really up to while our parents stressed about money and made excuses for his behavior. The house he was going to wasn't just a casual poker game with friends. There were way too many cars in the driveway and parked on the street. People coming and going at all hours. This wasn't a friendly game. This was something much bigger. I sat in my car for about an hour just watching, and the amount of money I saw changing hands was insane. We're talking about serious gambling, not just buddies playing cards for pocket change, and Wesley was right in the middle of it. When I got home that night, I called Brent and Maxine. I told them I had talked to Wesley about the financial situation and asked if they knew what he was doing 3 nights a week when he left the house. Maxine said he was socializing with friends and it was good for his mental health to get out and be around people. I asked if they knew he was gambling. The silence on that phone call lasted forever. Finally, Brent said that Wesley had mentioned playing some cards with friends, but it wasn't anything serious. I told them about what I had observed, the number of cars, the amount of money, the fact that this was clearly not just casual socializing. I said they needed to understand that Wesley wasn't healing from work trauma. He was making their financial situation worse by gambling, while they couldn't afford to support him. Maxine completely lost it on me. She started screaming about how I was spying on my brother and trying to cause problems in their family. She said I was jealous of Wesley's social connections and trying to isolate him from his friends. Brent joined in, telling me I had no right to follow Wesley around and that I was being controlling and manipulative. I said, look, I'm not trying to control anybody, but I am trying to understand why you two are consulting bankruptcy lawyers while supporting a grown man who's gambling instead of looking for work. And I need to understand what my liability is since my name is on your mortgage. That's when Brent said something that made my blood boil. He told me that if I was so concerned about the mortgage, maybe I should start making the payments myself instead of complaining about how they managed their household. I said, excuse me? You asked me to co-sign so you could refinance. You told me I was the responsible son who could help save the family home. Now you're telling me I should just start paying your mortgage while you support Wesley's gambling habit? Maxine chimed in, saying that if I couldn't handle the responsibility of being a co-signer, I shouldn't have agreed to it in the first place. She said, they never asked me to get involved in their day-to-day finances, and I was overstepping my boundaries. I hung up on them. But you know what? They just confirmed exactly what I needed to know. They view the co-signing as my obligation to fulfill, but they don't want me to have any say in how they manage the household that I'm financially responsible for. Wesley can gamble away money they don't have while living rent-free, and that's fine. I can sleep in my car during a housing emergency, and that's also fine. But heaven forbid I point out that their financial decisions are affecting my credit and my legal obligations. Well, I've got some news for all 3 of them. If they want to play games with my financial stability, I can play games too. And I've been preparing for this game a lot longer than they realize. Final update. I can barely type this because my hands are still shaking from what went down today. Remember how I said I'd been preparing for this moment for 3 years? Well, the day finally came, and it was everything I hoped it would be and more. To everyone who said I should just walk away and let them figure out their own mess, I'm sorry, but that was never an option. These people told me I should be homeless while supporting their thieving son's gambling habit. They used my good credit to save their house, then treated me like garbage. Walking away would have meant they got to keep benefiting from my financial responsibility while giving me zero respect or consideration. So here's what I did. Remember how Brent told me if I was so concerned about the mortgage, I should start making the payments myself? Well, I took that advice, sort of. I called the mortgage company and explained that as the co-signer, I was concerned about my liability given some recent developments with the household composition. I asked about my rights and obligations, specifically what would happen if the borrowers were engaging in activities that violated the loan terms. Turns out, when you co-sign a mortgage, you have more leverage than most people realize. I informed them that one of the borrowers was currently housing an individual with multiple theft convictions who was engaged in regular gambling activities, neither of which had been disclosed when the loan was modified. I provided documentation of Wesley's employment history and the dates of his terminations for theft. The mortgage company launched an investigation. Within 2 weeks, they sent Brent and Maxine a letter stating that the undisclosed change in household composition, combined with the increased financial risk factors, constituted a violation of their loan agreement. They had 30 days to either remove the unauthorized occupant or pay the full remaining balance immediately. When Brent called me screaming about this, I calmly explained that I had simply exercised my rights as a co-signer to protect my financial interests. He accused me of trying to destroy their family and demanded to know how I could do this to my own parents. I told him very clearly, "You had a choice when my apartment flooded. You could have let me sleep on your couch for one night, or you could have shown me exactly where I stood in your priorities. You chose to protect Wesley's comfort over your other son's basic safety. You told me you'd rather see me homeless than inconvenience your precious golden child." Remember those words, Brent? Because I sure do. Maxine got on the phone and started crying, saying they never meant it the way it sounded, that they were just stressed about Wesley's situation and didn't handle it well. She begged me to call the mortgage company and explain that it was all a misunderstanding. I asked her, which part was the misunderstanding? When you laughed at me for being homeless? When you said maybe sleeping in my car would make me less pathetic? When you posted on social media about being blessed that Wesley was home safe while I was dealing with a housing emergency? Which of those things did you not mean exactly the way they sounded? She couldn't answer that, because we all knew she meant every single word. Wesley tried a different approach. He showed up at my apartment last weekend begging me to fix this situation. He said our parents were elderly and didn't deserve to lose their house over family drama. He promised he would start paying rent and looking for legitimate work if I would just call off the mortgage company. I looked him straight in the eye and asked, where exactly were these promises when I was sleeping in my car? Where was this concern for family when our parents were choosing your comfort over my basic safety? You've had months to step up and contribute to the household you were destroying financially. Why didn't your conscience kick in then? He said he didn't know how bad things had gotten with their finances. I said that's exactly the problem, Wesley. You've been living in their master bedroom rent-free while they stressed about money and consulted bankruptcy lawyers, and you were too self-absorbed to even notice. You were too busy gambling to care that they were sacrificing everything to support your lazy lifestyle. Wesley got angry and accused me of being vindictive and cruel. He said this was bigger than just him, that I was punishing our parents for mistakes he made. I told him he was absolutely right. This was bigger than just him. This was about 3 years of watching our parents choose a thief over their responsible son. This was about them using my credit to save their house, then telling me I had no right to have opinions about how they managed it. He said our parents loved both of us equally. They just handled the situation poorly. I laughed and asked him if he really believed that. I said when push came to shove, when there was a choice between Wesley's comfort and my basic safety, who did they choose? When there was a choice between supporting Wesley's gambling habit and acknowledging my financial contribution to keeping their house, who did they prioritize? The 30-day deadline came and went. Brent and Maxine had been desperately trying to find somewhere else for Wesley to live, but nobody wanted to take in a 27-year-old man with his employment history. They tried to get a loan modification or extension, but the mortgage company wasn't interested in negotiating with borrowers who had violated their agreement terms. Meanwhile, Wesley's mysterious opportunities that were going to change his financial situation? Turns out those were deeper gambling debts he thought he could win his way out of. When the pressure mounted and he realized he might actually have to face consequences for his actions, he doubled down at those poker games trying to win big. Instead, he lost even more. The foreclosure process began 3 weeks ago. Brent called me one last time, practically begging me to intervene. He said they would do anything to make this right, that they understood now how badly they had treated me and wanted to fix their mistakes. I said it was too late for that. The time to show me I mattered was when I needed a place to sleep for one night. The time to treat me with respect was when I was legally responsible for keeping their house out of foreclosure. The time to prioritize fairness over favoritism was before they gave their criminal son the master bedroom while I slept in my car. He said they knew they had messed up, but losing their house was too extreme a punishment for one night of bad judgment. I said, one night? We both know this wasn't one night of bad judgment. This was a pattern that had been going on my entire life. Wesley was always the golden child who could do no wrong, and I was always the problem who should be grateful for scraps of attention. Yesterday, they had to vacate the house. The sheriff's department supervised the removal of their belongings. Brent and Maxine are staying with Maxine's sister, sleeping on an air mattress in her spare room. Wesley is couch surfing between friends because even his own parents' temporary housing situation doesn't have room for him. They called me from Maxine's sister's house yesterday evening, both of them on speakerphone, practically in tears. They said they were wrong about everything, that they should have supported me when I needed help, that they realized now how unfairly they had treated me compared to Wesley. I said yes, you were wrong, and yes, you should have supported me. And yes, you treated me unfairly, but do you know what the difference is between us? When I needed help, I asked politely and accepted your decision when you said no. I didn't demand that you fix my problems or bail me out of consequences I created for myself. Maxine said they were my parents, and they had raised me and I owed them more than this. I said, really? Because when I needed my parents the most, you told me I should be homeless. You literally said you'd rather see your son sleeping under a bridge than in your house. Those were your words, Maxine. I'm just giving you the chance to live by them. The final conversation ended with them screaming that I couldn't do this to family, that blood was thicker than water, that I was destroying people who loved me over one misunderstanding. I said blood might be thicker than water, but apparently it's not thicker than your favoritism toward Wesley. You had every opportunity to show me that family meant something to you. Instead, you showed me exactly what I was worth to you compared to your golden child. And then I hung up. You know what the most satisfying part of all this is? Wesley's friends who he was gambling with? Turns out when you don't have a stable address or income, those social connections disappear real fast. The people who were happy to take his money during those poker games suddenly don't have room for him to crash when he needs a favor. My parents, who spent years making excuses for Wesley's behavior and prioritizing his comfort over everything else, are now seeing exactly what kind of son they chose to invest in. He's not contributing to their temporary housing situation. He's not helping them figure out where to go next. He's just another burden for them to carry while they deal with the consequences of their choices. Meanwhile, I'm living comfortably in my own apartment, with stable employment and good credit. The same qualities they dismissed as worthless when they decided Wesley was the son worth supporting. Sometimes I think about that night when my apartment flooded. If they had just let me sleep on their couch for one night, if they had shown me even basic human decency when I was in crisis, none of this would have happened. Their house would be safe, Wesley would still be living rent-free in the master bedroom, and they would never have faced any consequences for their favoritism. But they made their choice. They chose to protect Wesley's comfort over my basic safety. They chose to prioritize a thief's feelings over their responsible son's welfare. So now they get to live with that choice permanently.